Alright everybody, welcome to an episode of Physics Games Game Development. So this is going to be quite different from the Enter the Gungeon gameplay, and what we're actually going to do here is we're going to look at Enter the Gungeon from a game development or design standpoint. So I am no game designer or game developer in reality. I'm just an avid video game player as well as a software developer at my full-time job. That being said though, my full-time job is more software like assembly level. I don't have access to a lot of these fun little things that we'll have in Unity, which we'll be using later on. In C#, it's a lot more high level, a lot more powerful language. So it'll be a learning process for both of us in all honesty. Hey guys, before we get started with this video, I just wanted to let you know to let me know in the comments below if I've skipped over anything or if you think I made something seem a little bit too simple and I needed to spend some more time on it, or if I really messed up and missed something important. Would really appreciate it. Thanks. What I want to do now in this first little episode is I want to look at what makes Enter the Gungeon tick. Why is it a fun game, basically? So I want to look at a few different things, and I want to start with making sure that we separate two different portions of the game. The first portion that I want to separate here is that we have things that exist in the game itself that aren't related to individual runs, and then things that are related to individual runs. So we have, we'll call it permanent, and we'll call it run dependent. So the major difference between these two is exactly what it sounds like. You have permanent pieces. Let's say, I don't know how to spell apparently, permanent. I'm probably still spelling it wrong. Someone will tell me in the comments, please. But in any case, what we have is permanent. Think like hegemony credits. Think different NPCs that you've saved and they show up in the breach. Think the change of your loot table when you unlock specific items. And you have run dependent. Think the map changes every single run. You get different chests each time. You might have different bosses, mini bosses. You're gonna get different drops, all that kind of stuff. So I want to focus first on these permanent things. I'm probably still spelling that wrong. I think I am. Permanent. There we go. It's an E. My bad. Let's fix that here so I don't look too stupid. Okay, so in these permanent things, like what I had just talked about, let's put a few little squares down so we can just remember what each part is. So we have NPCs, so that'll be both in the breach and in the individual runs. We have, let's look at what guns and stuff are unlocked. So let's look at item unlocks. Let's see, what else do we have? We have hegemony credits. Hegemony credits. You'll have things that aren't game dependent, like your audio levels, your visual settings, that kind of thing. And, you know, instead of making a separate one, let's just call it like player preferences, game options. And let's put one more that's very similar for saved data. Now the reason that I'm putting these separate is that these player preferences or game options, you can leave totally visible to the user in some text file somewhere. You don't really care if they go in at some point and change something by saying, hey, you know what, actually I'm going to change my audio level from 50% to 100%, and for some reason I really want to do it in this text editor rather than launching the game. Versus save data, we're going to probably want to create some kind of file that has either some binary encoding or some kind of obfuscation to it. And this way players can't go in and say, you know what, I know I haven't actually beaten the Lich yet, but I'm going to go ahead and give myself all the unlocks that would come with it, just because I don't really feel like actually playing the game to that point. So there's a bit of a difference between the two there. And as far as these other three go, it's a little bit self-explanatory, I believe. So NPCs, you just, whatever you've unlocked from opening cells down in the breach, they're permanent. You can either find them in the breach if they're individual shop owners, or you can find them down in individual runs, depending on what kind of NPC they are. Item unlocks, you can either get from completing different achievements, or you can purchase them from different shops from these NPCs here, and it'll be added into your loot pool. And hegemony credits is just the currency that persists between your individual runs that you use to buy these unlocks, which you get from these NPCs. So I guess let's take a look at the run dependent ones. Now the first thing that I'm going to look at is probably the map. Oh, actually we forgot a huge one for permanent. Let's go back here. I'm going to make this box like twice as big because this is like the most important part of the game, in all honesty. Randomness. Now, it might seem weird to call randomness part of the permanent section, but this is probably the most important portion of this game here. If you don't have a good random number generator, this game would not be fun. Imagine if you played and every single time that first floor was almost the exact same, right? Maybe 3 or 4 of the rooms moved around, but the other 8 stayed the same. It's not going to be as interesting. Or if every chest always had the same gun to it, you're not going to have a good time. So this is incredibly important. And what's interesting is that there's a different level of randomness to different portions of the game. So let's look at those NPCs actually. So it's sort of random which ones you're going to see. You're always going to see the shop, every single floor. That's a given, right? But now that we've unlocked a few of those NPCs that are on each floor, like Professor Gupton or the vampire guy who'll trade you hearts for money, it's random whether or not you're going to see those NPCs. But at the same time, that randomness is different from the randomness that spawns enemies in rooms or the randomness that fills chests with different loot. We know that these are different because those chests and that loot and all that, that's always going to be there. You're always going to have loot inside of a chest. You're always going to have enemies spawning in rooms. But what you're not always getting is these NPCs. So what I'm thinking is that they have a few different random number generators inside of the game. I would personally probably have, I don't know, 1 or 2. It might go up to 3 or 4. But you're going to have randomness that is used to generate maps. You're going to have randomness that is used to spawn enemies inside of that map. Those might be part of the same. You're going to have randomness for what level chest you get and what the loot is inside of those. And you're going to have randomness for these things like NPCs and for what chest drops you get, for what key drops you get, for what ammo drops, etc. There's a few different portions to this, and I firmly believe that this is one of the most important parts of the game. Unfortunately, it's also one of the most boring parts of the game to look at development for, but I really think that's what you have to start with, because if you don't have good randomness, these games just aren't fun. So now that we have that down, let's go to the run-dependent ones. So this is going to be some of that stuff that I actually just talked about, so we'll be able to bang some of these out really quick. First up, let's put down the map. If the map's the same every time, it's not fun. Let's look at, you'll also get loot drops and chest spawns. Similar to map, you'll also have enemy spawns. Enemy spawn. And you'll have loot. So we already talked about loot drop. But what you're also going to get here is NPCs, shrines, and things like gun muncher and whatnot. But we'll probably just consider that NPC for now, actually. Let's see. What else is going to be run dependent? Oh, it's a good point for something to put into permanent here. let's put in here characters, and there's starting items. Okay, back to run dependent. So you have, when you drop into the breach, you'll have a different map each time. You'll get different loot drops each time. You'll find different NPCs, different shrines, different enemy spawns, different bosses. Honestly, I think that kind of covers it. I mean, it seems like it should be more, but it seems like about it. I guess let's go back to permanent. Let's put down a few other things that I was going to put into run dependent, but I think they're actually in the permanent section. So we're going to look at like enemy data, enemy types, and data. So this is like, you never know on the first floor if you're going to face mostly blue shotgun kin, mostly bullet kin, mostly red shotgun kin, etc. But those different enemies persist between each run. You're always going to see those enemies. They always have the same attack patterns. So I will put that in the permanent section. As well as, similarly, you're always going to see different weapons, but weapon data and attacks are always going to be the same. If you use the black hole gun in your first run of the day and you use it again in your 100th run of the day, it's going to do the same thing no matter what. Similarly, we're going to have active and passive item data. So actually, let's just go ahead and change weapon data to item data. I feel like that's probably good enough. That's a good start for now. This first episode, like I said, we're not really going to be looking at any actual development. We're just doing some floor planning, and it's a very important step. If you ever skip this in your software development, you're going to feel the pain later on. So it's always better to start off doing the boring stuff like this and then eventually get to the more interesting things. So I want to look at that randomness that we discussed and how I had said it's one of the most important pieces of the game in my opinion. So I think what we're going to be looking at is a few different types of random number generators. I'm no guru on these things at all whatsoever. Well, it doesn't look like freehand drawing is supported in this, so what I'm going to do is something quite gross and just draw a bunch of lines. So I think one type, oh man, yeah, this is going to be gross. Well, we're kind of struggling with this, so maybe I'll cheat a little bit. I'm gonna move in a different chart. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna look up types of random distribution. Right, so let's come into a list of probability distributions here in the Wikipedia. And I think what we want to be looking at is a combination here. Let's look at this guy. So we definitely want something like this black one here. That's for sure. Let's see, what else do we have? These seem a little bit too harsh in their drop off. Same with these. They also start at 1. We need it to start at 0 and end at 1. That is not what we want. I mean, this is a little bit closer. I don't like this cliff at the start here, though. So let's go back. I think we want this, the chi-square distribution. This was the closest to what we're looking for. So let's... a little cheating, but whatever. So we're going to look at this randomness here. And I think what we want is this k equals 1 line where we just slowly drop down. We really want to move this over so that it's at about 1. So what we're looking to get is a random number generation that's very heavily weighted to one side. And we're going to use this for things like chests and loot drops. Actually, no. We're going to use it just for the chest, I think, as well as maybe NPCs. So the usefulness here is we want to look at what type of chest you're going to get depending on what floor you're on. So earlier floors, you should have a higher chance of getting something like brown. So that would be, let's say, if your random number generation comes up somewhere around here, you're going to get a brown chest. Now, if your random number generator comes up between this line here and this line here, well, you might get a blue one. And this one here and this one here is green, and then red and black, and then at this little itty bitty corner here is your rainbow chest. So this is quite important. If you don't have something like this, if you were to say use that, what's the other one here? This continuous uniform distribution, you have no randomness in your chests. You're just always going to get one type of chest, basically. Or even if you divided this into different sections, like you said, from here to here is brown, here to here is blue, etc., you have the same exact chance of getting each type of chest as each other, which is fine when you're looking at for what items go into that chest. But when you're looking at what type of chest you want to get, this is not what you want. So let's say we're going to use that for the chest. I feel like we might end up using it for shrines and NPCs as well. But let's say this is for chest type spawning. We want higher probability of lower tier chests. So what is going to change that? So what floor you're on, let's see, let me add a list here. Floor level. You also want to look at current equipment. At least the game currently does this. It's called Magnificence. Honestly, I don't really think that's necessary. There is a chance, you know, you could get super lucky and every single chest you get is a gold or a black chest, and then the game really isn't going to be too fun because you're just going to steamroll. But I think if the RNG gives you that, it gives you that, right? I'm probably going to ignore that. I'm just putting it there so that you know that the game has this invisible stat that covers that. So we're looking at floor level, you're looking at current equipment. You can also look at the other chest that has spawned, basically, so that they're not completely independent. Maybe they have a little bit of dependency. So if you get one blue chest and you roll a second blue chest, you might want to roll again. If you get a blue chest again, that's just the way it is. But if you get something different, then just choose that. Look at the other chests on floor, I guess. So I feel like there's probably going to be more to that, but we can always come back to it, right? Then we're going to look here, go back, and we want this continuous distribution. So we'll plop that guy in there. Try to make him about the same size, good enough. Now this guy is pretty much going to be used exclusively for loot pools. Loot pool spawns. And the reason I say that is so you have these chests of your different rarity over here, and the items inside of that chest should be entirely uniform. You shouldn't be more heavily weighted towards the left or the right end when you're looking at that. It should just be you have a, you know, if there's 10 S level items you can get out of a black chest, you should have a 1/10 chance of getting the black hole gun, a 1/10 chance of getting the 7-leaf clover, etc. Now, there should be a little bit more randomness. I feel like you're going to want some kind of regular uniform distribution, and that's going to be used for certain items where you have, like, you know, an X% chance of getting some type of like charm or a critical hit or something like that. So let's look at, really we just want like a regular bell curve. I don't know what kind of distribution that is. I'm not a statistician. I'm sure someone out there is, and they'll comment on here and say, well, actually you want a Conway Maxwell Poisson distribution here because you like this little red line. And they're probably right. I think I do. I don't know, actually. And like I said, this is just for things like proc chances. There's probably more stuff that we want to use it for, but we're just going to leave it at that for now. So we have 3 different types of randomness that we're looking at here. Each one has its own, I guess, task to it. This is the chi-square distribution, which we're going to look at the types of chests that you're going to spawn, and maybe it'll put NPCs in there too. For some NPCs are just better than others. Like, you know, let's face it, like the Synergents one is probably going to be down here. And the vampire, he might be over here. And then the guy that you can trade keys for items, yeah, he can spawn more often, whatever. Same with the cell creep or the gun muncher. And then you have this continuous uniform distribution. You're looking at loot pool spawns. I think that's probably going to be the only tool that this is useful for. And finally, we have this binomial distribution, which we're looking at proc chances. So you have, you know, X chance to actually charm an enemy or get the Vorpal blade attack with your Vorpal gun or your Vorpal shells, your Bumble bullets, all that kind of good stuff. I think that should cover it for randomness for now. Okay, so now that covers some of randomness, at least the basics to it. There's a lot of other stuff here, and there's a bunch of stuff in here too. I'm trying to keep this video slightly shorter. I don't want to put out like an hour-long video of me trying to break down a lot of this stuff. So let me go into some of the run-dependent things. I think some of these are a little bit easier to discuss. So let's look first at the map and enemy spawns. So we're going to look at this guy and enemy spawns at the same time. Might as well move these guys over, just so these are next to each other. Alright, so the map and enemy spawns. Now, let me see. Let me pull up a picture of a map. Let's look at like the floor 3 map or something. Just have somebody with like a full screen capture of the map in here. Yeah, that's good enough. So this is just here as a reference pretty much. So what I want you to look at here. The map looks totally random, all scattered, everything's everywhere. You got a bunch of different junk, right? But in reality, this map is just a tree. So it's a little sort of difficult to picture. But take this part here. This is the elevator that you entered in on. This is the root of your tree. And from there, each of these hallways that connect you between different rooms, that's just a vertex between each node. So what we can do is create a tree that has one root here. You could also theoretically start the root from the boss room and work backwards. I think either way would work as long as you have a route on either end, either the exit of the level or the entrance of the level. You know, it's totally up to you. I'm going to personally probably put it at the entrance. That makes sense to me. But in any case, you have your entry route and then it sprawls throughout all these directions and everything. You can sort of ignore it. It's very important for the gameplay, but for the generation of the map, all you need is different rooms, their connections, and maybe what direction it goes in so you don't try to overlap a bunch of them. So what we want to do is look at a tree. Maps are trees. Route at the elevator entrance. Each connection hallway is a vertex. And a vertex is just a connection point between two nodes. Each room is a node and can have any number of vertices. So you'll see some of these rooms are bigger. Like this guy here, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vertices. And some of these rooms are much smaller. Like this guy only has 1, 2. Your root only has 1. This boss room is always only going to have 2. And some rooms will have these secret rooms as well. So you'll actually have like Professor Gupton here has 1, 2, 3, and then a secret 4th one. Although it could be coming off of this room, but in any case, it has that secret room in there. So each room is a node and it can have any number of vertices. Now one important thing I'm going to put in here is each floor has an increasing number of rooms. So floor 1 is only going to have, let's say, like 10 rooms or something, but floor 2 or the oubliette could have 15, floor 3 could have 20, etc. I don't think it's just a static number. It probably has more to it. I'm going to guess that there is some weighting to each room based on the size and the number of enemies that are going to spawn in it. Your vertices will also have different weights to them. So you could have that locked hallway that goes into chest rooms or the shop or whatever. And I feel like that would have a higher weight to it, or a cost, I guess, for the floor versus just an open one. So let's put something down there that says rooms have a cost depending on their size and number and type of enemy spawns. So bulletkin probably don't cost too much to spawn, but the big mushrooms or the lich guy, they're going to cost a lot more to spawn. So that room would be more expensive. It'll eat up more of whatever that floor's total value is. I think we'll leave that at there for now. So we'll need randomness and a tree generation to get sort of started. Definitely not the most fun things. They're not very visual. You can make that map visual, but for now I'm probably just going to make some kind of tree that has some kind of cost weight to it, and we'll work from there. Let's also put in map needs to ensure that at least 2 chest rooms and 1 shop are created. So you're guaranteed those for each floor, in addition to the boss room. That's very important. Oop, wait, what just happened? Undo that. Same for boss room. And 1 secret room. Okay, I think that might about cover it for the map. Now for enemy spawns, we're doing a similar thing in reality. So we're going to look at the size of the room and create a cost, create a budget for it, spawn enemies in random / pseudo-random locations until, no, let's go back. So you've created that budget. Now we're going to create some kind of pseudo-random enemy spawn based on that budget. So bulletkin might cost you 5 total points out of that budget, and a blue shotgunkin will cost you 8 or something like that. Now this is very important for your balancing. If you get these numbers wrong, the game won't be very fun. It's going to be either way too hard or way too easy. Like if you said bulletkin cost 5 and blue shotgunkin cost 6, well, it's just going to spawn a ton of blue shotgunkin, which aren't the hardest enemies, but it's just going to be so repetitive. If you take it to a more extreme example, if you go down to the forge and you're saying ashen shotgunkin cost 6 and blue shotgunkin also cost 6, well, why not just put in a ton of ashen shotgunkin, which are just overall much harder to face than any blue shotgunkin is? You know, you have to really try to balance those numbers out to make it enjoyable. And there's definitely going to be more to it. You should have something that checks like, hey, is the player within X inches or pixels or whatever of this spawn point? If he is, try to move it a little bit so that they don't spawn right on top of you or something like that. But this is a decent basis for now. So in this episode, we didn't obviously cover literally everything about the game. There's going to be a lot more to it, but we're breaking it down slowly. There's probably going to be 1 or 2 more episodes where we look at this, where we're just saying, you know, hey, what's in this permanent tree? How can I break this down a little bit to make it slightly easier? Or what's in this run dependency tree? How do I break this down to make it slightly easier? Just get individual tasks and work on it from there, rather than trying to just say like, hey, I'm going to make this whole game from scratch. Why not? Let's just start from the top and immediately jump into it, because that's just going to be difficult. In any case, appreciate you guys watching. Let me know in the comments below what mistakes I made, if there was anything that you thought I had missed. I would really appreciate some feedback on it. If you saw like, oh, hey, you looked at the randomness and that chi-square distribution, I don't think that's really what you want. You want to look at this other type of distribution. Or, yeah, sure, maps are trees, but you can't really look at it just that way because there's X, Y, and Z you got to think about. In any case, again, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.